Hello and welcome to Story Time. Our book today is The Ugly Vegetables. At the start of the book, there's a little note that the author has for its readers. So let's find out what that's about. A note to the reader. That's me and you. You may find some unfamiliar words in this story. Pronounce them as you guess. They sound from the way they are spelled. Or turn to the last page of the book for help. So there might be some words that we may not know or are unfamiliar with. So the reader has helped us to just read them as they are spelt, or for us to guess how they are pronounced. In the spring, I helped my mother start our garden. We used tall shovels to turn the grass upside down, and I saw pink worms wriggle around. It was hard work. When we stopped to rest, we saw that the neighbors were starting their gardens too. So it sounds like it's gardening season and everyone's out in the garden getting ready by pre-readying their garden soil to start planting their wonderful vegetables, flowers, and different things in their garden. Now, on this page, I didn't see any unfamiliar words, so I think I pronounced all the words correct. Let's keep going. Hello, Irma. My mother called to Mrs. Crummermine. Mrs. Crummermine was digging too. She was using a small shovel. The one fit in her hand. Mummy, I asked, why are we using such big shovels? Mrs. Crummermine has a small one because our garden needs more digging, she said. So here we have, I think, Mrs. Crummermine, and she's using a little shovel to dig her garden, and they are using a big one. I helped my mother plant the seeds, and we dragged the hose to the garden. Hi, Linda. Hi, Mickey, I called to the Fitzgeralds. They were sprinkling water in their garden with green watering cans. Mummy, I asked, why are we using a hose? Linda and Mickey use watering cans. Because our garden needs more water, she said. So on this page, I had a little bit of a challenge reading some of the names. So I remembered what the author said to me, and I tried to pronounce the words as they were spelt, like Crummermine and Fitzgerald. Then my mother drew funny pictures on pieces of paper, and I stuck them into the garden. Hello, Roseanne, my mother called across the street to Mrs. Angel Howe. Mummy, I asked, why are we sticking these papers in the garden? Mrs. Angel Howe has seed packages in her garden because our garden is going to grow Chinese vegetables, she told me. These are the names of the vegetables in Chinese. so I can tell which plants are growing where. So here are the different labels of the different Chinese vegetables that they're going to grow in their garden. One day I saw our garden growing. Little stems that looked like grass had popped out from the ground. Our garden's growing, I yelled. Our garden's growing. I rushed over to the neighbor's garden to see if theirs had grown. Their plants looked like little leaves. Mummy, I asked, why do our plants look like grass? The neighbor's plants look different. Because they are growing flowers, she said. Why can't we grow flowers? I asked. These are better than flowers, she said. So here are the neighbor's little flower plants, and here are the plants they are growing. And remember what her mum said in the previous pages, they're growing Chinese vegetables. Soon all the neighbors' gardens were blooming. Up and down the streets grew rainbows of flowers. The wind always smelled sweet, and the butterflies and bees flew everywhere. Everyone's gardens were beautiful except for ours. And as you can see from the picture, there's lots of colors of different plants and flowers, butterflies and birds and bees in the gardens as the flowers grow into big plants. Our garden was all dark green and ugly. Why didn't we grow flowers? I asked again. These are better than flowers, Mummy said again. I looked, but saw only black, purple, green vines, fuzzy, wrinkled leaves, prickly stems, and a few little yellow flowers. I don't think so, I said. You wait and see, Mummy said. So here again, the little girl's a little bit disappointed that their garden is not as pretty as their neighbors. But her mum said, have faith in us and our garden. You'll see. Before long, our vegetables grew. Some were big and lumpy. Some were thin and green and covered with bumps. Some were just plain icky yellow. They were ugly vegetables. Oh, she's not very happy with their garden. She's disappointed by the appearance of her garden because it's not as pretty as the neighbors that's full of different colors of the rainbow flowers. Sometimes I would go over to the neighbors and look at their pretty gardens. They would show the poppies and the peonies and the petunias to me, and I would feel sad as our garden wasn't as nice. Oh. The gardens of her neighbors do look pretty, but I know her mum has a plan for their garden and to grow vegetables that they can use and eat in the coming weeks and months. One day, my mother and I picked the vegetables from the garden. We filled a whole wheelbarrow full of them. We wheeled them to the kitchen. My mother washed them, took a big knife and started to chop them. So finally, the plants that they grew have been taken out of the ground for use, and the mum is on to the next step of growing her own vegetables in their garden. Ayo, she said when she cut them. She had to use all her muscles. The vegetables were hard and tough. This is xiao, hu guao, Mummy said, handing me a bumpy, curly vegetable. She pointed at the other vegetables. This is xian kai. That's a tong hao. So now I've seen some very unfamiliar words that I think is Chinese. So I've taken the words at face value and the sounds and tried to pronounce them in the best way that I think they are correct. I hope I am. I went outside to play. While I was playing catch with Mickey, a magical aroma filled the air. I saw the neighbors standing on their porches with their eyes closed, smelling the sky. They took deep breaths of air like they were trying to eat the smell. The wind carried it up and down the street. Even the bees and the butterflies seemed to smell the scent in the breeze. Wonder what that smell is. I smelled it too. It made me hungry, and it was coming from my house. When I followed the smell to my house, my mother was putting a big bowl of soup on the table. The soup was yellow and red and green and pink. This is a special soup, Mummy said, and she smiled. She gave me a small bowl full of it, and I tasted it. It was so good. The flavors of the soup seemed to dance in my mouth and laugh all the way down my stomach. I smiled. Do you like it? Mummy asked me. I nodded and held out my bowl for some more. It's made from the vegetables, she told me. Then the doorbell rang and we ran to open the door. Now, doesn't that bowl of soup look very, very delicious? And it's all made up from the vegetables they grew in their garden. All our neighbors were standing at the door holding flowers. We noticed you were cooking, Mr. Fitzgerald laughed as he held out his flowers. We thought maybe we might be interested in a trade. We laughed too, and my mother gave them each their own bowl of her special soup. My mother told them what each vegetable was and how she grew it. She gave them the soup recipe and put some soup into jars for them to take home. I ate 5 bowls of soup. It was the best dinner ever. And look at all of them round the table enjoying the special soup her mum made from all the vegetables they grew in their garden. Oh, someone's ripped this page, but luckily they haven't ripped the page where we have to read. The next spring, when my mother was starting her garden, we planted some plants next to the Chinese vegetables. Mrs. Crummermine, the Fitzgeralds, and the Angel House planted some Chinese vegetables next to their flowers. Soon the whole neighborhood was growing Chinese vegetables in their gardens. Up and down the street, the little green plants poked out of the ground. Some looked like leaves and some looked like grass. And when the flowers started blooming, you could smell soup in the air. And that is the end of our story today. Isn't it wonderful that the girl, although at the start of the book wasn't happy with her mum's decision or choices of plants that were put in her garden because they were all vegetables and they weren't as pretty as the flowers that the neighbors had put in their gardens. But in the end, she realized that the vegetables that grew in her garden ended up being a special made soup. And the following season of gardening, all her neighbors joined them in planting some flowers and some vegetables, and they all enjoyed the soup.